Shelly Tygielski, it is so good to see you and to have you a part of the Heart's Path and be able to spend some time with you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
So we're here to help kind of people navigate their paths and kind of better understand like how they listen, how we can kind of like find what's ours to do in the world. You have an amazing story of all kinds of different journeys. I'm wondering if we could just start with kind of, if we can kind of go back, 20 years ago and like, what did you study in college? What did you want to be when you grew up? Like, what were some of kind of your first places of exploration? And then a little bit later, we'll talk like how that all led into some of your work now. But going back, like, what was the younger Shelley like when you was just starting to look out at the world and kind of ask that question of like, what the hell do I do with this world?
Yeah. Well, I grew up in a bubble. I was born in Israel. I was born to an Orthodox Jewish family, very traditional. And so in that manner, my life was pretty much set for me in a way, like there was this expectation of be a good girl, follow the laws of Judaism, and meet a nice Jewish boy and get married, and have many kids so that your parents could be really happy with that. And feisty as I was, that wasn't necessarily the path that I envisioned for myself. We wound up coming to America. We wound up moving here from Israel, first to New York and then to South Florida, which is where I spent a big portion of my childhood. And I actually, wound up going to a public school. And my brothers wound up going to a yeshiva, or like a traditional Jewish school, day school for boys. And because I was a girl and my parents couldn't afford to also send me, I wound up going to a public school. And that actually, I feel like, is the biggest gift that they gave me, because it expanded my view of the world. Coming to America certainly did as well, but being in a public school with all sorts of people that if I had stayed in my bubble, I never would have really had a chance to meet or interact with, people that challenged me in many different ways and helped me, grow. And certainly a lot of the interactions that I had with teachers that were really formidable in helping me think about things in different ways that I wasn't getting at home. Like I wasn't getting like that feminist rhetoric at home or the activist rhetoric. And it was around middle school when I met my best friend at the time, who I still keep in touch with, by the way. Her name is Jennifer, and she had the most beautiful, like red hair. I mean, like literally the most beautiful hair you've ever seen. And I remember sitting behind her in 7th grade, and Jennifer invited me over to her house. She was an only child, and she was really into, this is the early 90s, like 89, 90, 91. She was really into Greenpeace, and she was really into PETA, the People for Ethical Treatment of Animals. And so instead of like having a normal play date, she basically said, let's go knock on doors. And we took her, like radio wagon, what is that, radio flyer wagon? And we had like little clipboards, and we were going door to door to save the whales and to boycott, L'Oreal for testing on animals. And, I was like, what's going on? Like, but that planted a seed with me. It actually really, it was something so interesting because it gave me a sense of power. It empowered me to recognize that maybe I can actually, do something to enact like change in this world for the better, and how is it that I'm not aware that this is happening to animals or to the whales or to, our planet or to trees? Like I just was so not acutely aware of anything beyond my bubble, which I think happens to a lot of us, right? And eventually what happens is that for most of us, the bubble doesn't necessarily, especially if the bubble is comfortable, it doesn't like expand on its own. But normally what happens is that at some point in our lives, the bubble bursts.
Yeah.
Right? And so if you're not equipped for a burst bubble, it can be really tragic and really traumatic. And
What would you
so,
say that bubble is, if we had to describe that bubble? Is that
yeah.
bubble is all the conditioned ways we are used to seeing the world? Is that an accurate description of that bubble? Or how, what would you, how would you define what that bubble is? That
Yeah,
we're,
so I mean, my particular bubble was definitely a place of privilege. You know, I didn't grow up in a wealthy family, but I grew up with comfortable middle class neighborhood. You know, didn't give it a second thought that I, you know, had white skin, that I was in a place where there were a lot of other Jewish people, so I wasn't discriminated against as a Jew. In fact, I was celebrated for being Israeli and speaking Hebrew, you know, whenever my mom and I would speak, like in the supermarket and talk to each other, people seemed to be like enthralled with that. I think also the fact that, you know, my family was had given us the opportunities to, you know, to travel back and forth to Israel and to have these like experiences that always gave me this benchmark or a way to compare and recognize that my, you know, the way that I was living here in the States was very different than the way that my cousins were living back home. And that I had a much more comfortable life and many more opportunities to really step into my own power and use my voice as a woman, as a girl that was coming into her own.
great, great. And then you said that at some point that bubble burst. And what age were you, and what was that process like?
So I would say my bubble was more like, you know, when you shake like a Coke bottle and then you kind of open it up too quick and it just fizzles. So that's not what happened. What happened to me was that it was like, you know, when you open it really slow and it sort of goes like fizzes out. That was more like what was happening in my bubble, right? Like the air was slowly coming out and you were kind of like, is there a hole? I don't think there's a hole. And then suddenly you're like, wait a minute, what's going on? And you know, I started to have all of these experiences, you know, when I was in high school, noticing like the way that like my father was really discriminatory against like certain classes or types of people, right? Demographic or religious or, you know, even skin color. I started to realize that my parents had this like prescribed path laid out for me. And when I rebelled against that, you know, when I finally kind of decided to say, nope, that's not what I'm doing. I'm going to be, you know, going to college and I'm going to get an undergrad degree and I'm going to go to med school and, you know, whatever it was that I had in my life at the time that I thought I was going, that my plan was that I thought I was going to do. My bubble burst when I felt really, you know, unsupported. And I felt like, you know, like questioning myself, like, am I worthy? Am I able to do this? Is there a reason why I should be kind of protecting myself and being back in this bubble that I grew up in, right? So I was like 1 foot in and 1 foot out for a really, really, really long time. And it really wasn't until, if you fast forward, it wasn't really until I got married at a really young age to a Jewish boy and had my son very quickly after I got married, that I realized that my life was really not my own. Like the decisions that I had made, you know, to get myself into this marriage, into this place where I was, and you know, all these things that I kind of tried to rebel against in high school and in college, just kind of led me back to the same place. So it was, and I felt very ill-equipped because I felt unsupported by the support structure that was around me, and that's when I really had to start over in a real way. I had to actually, you know, I had literally nothing. I left. It was just myself and my son, and I had my personal belongings, and I was like, we're gonna make it somehow. We'll figure it out, you know. And I just I started to lean into all of these different pieces or seeds that had been planted with me for many years, and lean into the inner journey and lean into like looking inward, because I realized like there's something wrong with me. Like I need to work on me and realize that I'm enough and that I'm worthy and that I am capable, and all of these, you know, hopes and dreams that I had and the ability to want to make a change in the world has to start with making like real changes in my life. And I really credit the fact that I had a little baby boy, you know, to actually whip me into shape, because I realized like there's a human life counting on me. Like I've got to figure this out, you know?
Wow. Wow. And so you had to, it sounds like you almost had to discover who you are and what your values were, independent of what the world had told you your whole life. Like what am I about? What are my values, and who am I deep down beyond all my stories and all my things?
Yes.
And can I
Yeah,
let that out into the world?
totally.
You also had to make a living. You also had to support a child. So like, did you, how did you navigate that from knowing your values and kind of knowing who you are, and then somehow managing to kind of find a place in the world to survive?
Well, fortunately, so I had an education, and I also have what we say in Yiddish is chutzpah, which means audacity. And I will tell you that the recurring theme in my life, and this is, I think, a really important takeaway for you know the attendees that are watching this, is that I wasn't ever afraid of showing up, if that makes sense. You know, I think it was Woody Allen that said like 99% of life is showing up. And it's true. It's like I kept showing up deliberately and intentionally. And even though things didn't go my way, like 90% of the time, the 10% of the time that it did, it was because people would say like, oh, you were at the right place at the right time. And it's like, no, I was here this whole time. I just kept showing up and you kept closing the door on me, you know? So, you know, I would say that like when I think back to like how I made a living or how I would get a job, or, you know, kind of moved up the corporate ladder and was able to more than provide for my son, thankfully, and kind of eventually like built out a home and, you know, get remarried, etc. It really came from the fact that I had the grit to do that, and I wasn't afraid. I wasn't afraid to fail myself. I was always afraid to fail others.
Mm.
And in a way that's like a blessing and a curse, because you know, you're always trying to go above and beyond because you want to please like everybody else, right? And a lot of times that comes at the expense of like your own mental health and sanity and everything else. But I wasn't afraid, you know, of you know, just going for it at that point, because I had nothing to lose.
Right.
And when you have nothing to lose, you're like, I got to figure this out. So I'm just going to keep showing up.
And so I know you had your time in corporate America and in the business world in a very kind of active way. And I also know from being your friend that there was a part where that chapter ended and you became more of an activist in a different way, to navigate a different path. Can you say a little bit about how you knew that that was a change you needed to make, and what that was like, going from kind of this secure income and secure position and security to kind of this other position where it's like might feel more aligned, but there's also a lot more unknowns?
Sure. So I need to mention that I started meditating when I was in grad school. So I had been meditating as a personal practice for 20 years. And I really think that it kept me sane during like the most horrible times of my life, the most challenging times, I should say. And I always had a community, you know, like a meditation community, a few people, or like just a sangha that was affiliated with you know, whether it was like a Buddhist center or a university, etc. And when I took the last corporate job I would ever hold, ever, I I didn't have time for that because I was the president of a mid-sized firm. We had 2,400 employees. We were in 14 markets. I was traveling the country. I was so busy. There was just no room to, you know, also be able to juggle like family and everything else that was going on in my life at the time. And so I was really, really longing for community, like desperately longing for it for years, for a couple of years. And it started to really weigh on me. So one November, like a blustery November morning, and this is Florida. So like how blustery can it get? But it was really like very windy. It was like Chicago windy. So it was November of 2015. I decided to just post on Facebook. I'm going to be meditating on Sunday morning at the beach. If anybody wants to join me, please do. Here's my coordinates. This is where I'll be. And I showed up on this Sunday morning, and I remember waking up and Jason, my husband, saying to me, "Are you still going? It's like it's hurricane force winds out. Like, what are you doing?" And I was like, "Nope, I'm still gonna go. People are gonna show up." And he was like, "Nobody's gonna show up. You're crazy. There's nobody's gonna show up." And I said, "It's fine because I'm gonna show up for myself. So it's okay." Like I resolved that I was gonna do this, and I'm gonna do it. So I went, and I remember it was so windy. I walked out to the beach, and you couldn't even like be on the sand because the sand was like micro exfoliating your skin, like, and it was just peeling. It was horrible. It was so windy. So we wound up going I wound up going to sit in the parking lot area, like in some patch of, it wasn't even grass. It was like dirt, basically. I just sat in a pile of dirt with a towel. And lo and behold, 12 people showed up.
Oh.
I know, 12 people showed up. And we all sat in a patch of dirt together in the parking lot of a beach, like a public parking lot. And I thought to myself, like, man, if we can meditate through this, we can do anything, you know? So it was wonderful. It actually,
That's how I first heard about you, actually. Somebody sent me, did you know about this woman that's meditating on the beach in Florida? Have you heard from her? My friend Eric was the first. That's how I knew of you initially.
oh, that's so funny.
Woman in Florida meditating on the beach with friends. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was amazing. It was really cool. It was like 12, 12 of my friends, people that I knew that all showed up because interestingly enough, they were all, when I look back, they were all going through something like a divorce, an illness, challenges at home. Like they all had something. And I think at that moment, like when they all needed to see that post and they were like, yes, this is what we need, And we all needed each other. We all needed to form this like community of care, this network, this safety net. And it was such a wonderful experience that we decided, hey, this was great. Let's do it again. We'll meet again in a couple of weeks. So we set a date, another Sunday in December. And this time we sat on the beach, and those friends brought a few other friends. And then we met the following week, and those friends brought a few other friends. And by May of the following year, we had like 1,500 people meditating on Sunday mornings at the beach. And every Sunday, and this goes back to the point of showing up. Now, understand this, I was still working full time running a company. So people would come up to me after meditation and, they would hug, or we would cry, we would commiserate. And they would say things like, can you come speak at my law firm? Or can you do one-on-one sessions? Or, just they would offer all these really interesting different opportunities. And I would just look at them like they were nuts. I would say, like, what are you talking about? Like, I have a fiduciary responsibility. Like, I'm running a company. This isn't my job. Like, that's crazy. Like, and, I'm not a guru. Like, I'm like you. I'm just trying to figure things out, So that was like the conversation. And finally, somebody came to me and said, my husband is a coach for a basketball team, and like, and I'm thinking like a high school basketball team, and said, and it would be really great if he could call you. Would you mind if he called you? And I said, no, that's totally fine. He can call me. And it wound up being a coach, the assistant to the head coach of the Miami Heat.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, and meanwhile, like, I have no idea what's going
Yeah.
on, like, I don't know who any of the players, like, I really don't know much about sports. And so, but I wound up driving down to the American Airlines Arena. I actually was intrigued enough. I took a day off of work, and I wound up meeting with a few of the coaches, and actually at the time some of the players. And I was like, every Monday when I get up to go, to work now, like, I feel so empty. Like, Sunday nights are getting harder, Mondays are getting really hard. And it wound up, kind of coming to a head when I went on a 2-week vacation in the Pacific Northwest with my family, and just being like in nature for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Our trip ended in Seattle. That was like our last night was in Seattle. And I remember being physically ill the entire, because we were taking a red eye home, and I literally had to get from the airport straight to work. And the entire night, that last night, I was physically ill.
Wow.
It was so like hard. And I knew that it was related to the anxiety and the stress that I was feeling about going back to work. And at that point, that's when Jason said to me, you need to quit. Like,
Yeah.
it's time, and I was so worried about, obligations, and we have a mortgage, and we have a kid in private school, and my mom had a stroke. So we like financially help her and support her. And how is this going to work? And with the help of some friends who were really encouraging, they basically said to me, look, we're going to be your safety net, so that give yourself 6 months. And if you don't figure it out in 6 months, then we will, hire you. I mean, it may not be like a luxurious job or whatever. It may not be the job you want, but you'll know that there's like something there for you. And to be honest with you, that the prospect of going to work for specifically one of my friends was so terrifying to me that I was like, oh my God, I have to have this succeed like in 6 months, or like I'm screwed, So that was like a big motivator. But it was actually also really helpful. I joke, but it was very helpful to just know that there was that safety net. And that
It's people who said, we got your back. We'll
got your back.
hold this
Believe in you.
not alone.
Yeah. Exactly. And and the other thing about it is, it's so interesting how your kids see you and they wind up being like your best teachers. I remember driving home from work one day, like on one of those, days when I was like, this is it, I'm going to quit, and I'm driving in traffic. It was like one of those days where it was like rainy, and every time I left the office to go to a meeting, there was traffic, and I didn't get home for like hours because there was a huge, closure on the highway. And I got home, and I didn't kind of like check in with myself before I walked in the door. And I brought all that in with me. And Liam was sitting, my son Liam, who at the time I think was probably, maybe 12 or 13 years old. So really cognizant of like kind of what was going on. I walked into the kitchen. He was sitting at the kitchen table, and I just immediately started like complaining about how horrible my day was, and there was all this traffic. And he said, Mom, what the happiest day of my life is going to be? And I swear I thought he was going to say like, when I get the hell out of this joint. And he said, when you quit that damn job and you just start taking your own advice.
Wow.
Like a complete, and I was like, whoa.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is huge. And so some people wonder, and some people, of course, decide like my karma or my path is to stay in the corporation and be my true self and, work things out, actually change from the inside, which is totally valuable. And
Totally.
some people feel like I need to go in my own direction and navigate this path. And I know you've done some extraordinary things kind of like in that other like navigation.
Yeah.
What do you tell people who are kind of in that place and they're like, Shelly, I don't see a lot of opening doors here. Like, I know what doesn't work. I've been doing it.
Yeah.
It's pretty clear to me. But in terms of like this other path, like
Mm,
I don't have a glimmer of a light that kind of can
yeah.
guide me right now. I don't feel like that. What do you notice yourself saying to somebody that's kind of feeling like that place?
So when I was like in that kind of final phase before I started this journey, this new segment, right? Shelly 2.0. Not to compete with Wisdom 2.0, but like, yeah. When I went into my second phase, right? I remember a friend of mine, her name is Lisa, and she said to me, and this was actually some of the best advice
Mm,
and technique that I've ever, and I still employ it, and I give this advice to anybody that's kind of in this state. She said, "Why don't you form a board of directors for Shelly?" And I go,
oh,
"What do you mean?" And she's like, "Well, why don't you put together a list of like 10 they don't even have to be friends, probably better that they don't know you very well, but like acquaintances, people that you admire in business, that you kind of have even like 2 degrees of connection to, and invite them to lunch. Like, you'll pay for lunch, and you're going to solicit their advice. They'll be your board of directors. And then every quarter you'll meet and you'll report back to them, and they'll hold you accountable and they'll give you ideas. And I was like, wow, that's like, is that really going to work? Do you think? And she was like, yes, I'll be the first person. And I was like, great. So she helped me put this together. And I actually had my first board of Shelly director meeting, or board of director of Shelly Inc. or whatever. And I didn't really have any like discernible direction, to be honest with you. And I remember there was a guy, who used to be an executive at a really big ad agency,
mm,
who didn't speak the entire time.
mm,
And people, the other individuals who were there were saying to me like, why don't you do this? And why don't you do, this? And they were like offering suggestions of like how to monetize certain things or what I should be doing and giving me examples. And I kept saying, nah, I don't really want to do that. Or I don't think I really want to do that. And finally, Bruce spoke up and he said, I haven't spoken this whole time. And it's because I just want to tell you that I'm so sick and tired of hearing you say what you don't want to do. Like, I want to know what you want to do.
mm,
And I looked at him and I said, Bruce, the problem is that I don't know what I want to do.
mm,
And he said, well, then try it all. Like, say yes to everything. And then by process of elimination, you'll eventually stumble into something that is right, or that is tweakable, or that at least is like leading you into the right direction, And so that was really sound advice, because I just started saying yes to everything. Like, if somebody wanted to hire me for like a one-on-one meditation or, coaching of some kind, I would say yes. I learned very quickly that I don't have the patience for that. And that's not how I want to be spending my time. But I learned, I wouldn't have known that, I wound up thinking, okay, I have a really authentic voice. I'm going to go and speak and teach in corporations, because who better than me to understand like the corporate experience? I've been in it for 20 years and recently out of it. And as soon as I walked into like that first boardroom, to do that 30-minute session, I was like, yeah, I don't think I want to do this either. So I just kind of like, through trial and error and not being afraid of saying no, and not perceiving like not liking something as like, oh, I failed at this, because that's a really stringent way of looking at things. It's very narrow. I like widened my scope, and I just said, okay, it's like the year of yes. I think there's like this woman who wrote a book, The Year of Yes.
I'm going to collect a lot of data points. I'm going to have more data points. And if it's still not failure, but if it really doesn't go well, that's a really important data point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so I didn't take anything personally. I was willing to try anything. I was game for anything. And I learned really quickly what filled my soul, what moved me, and what I wanted to spend my time doing.
So when people ask you now, do you have a definition of yourself? Like, these are my this is who I am. This is kind of what drives me. And
Yeah.
what is that phrase? And do you encourage other people to do the same?
Yeah. So my phrase, which took me years to get to and many, many data points, was that I am a self-care activist
Mhm.
and a trauma-informed mindfulness teacher that works with underserved communities.
Great, great. And that can take a lot of different forms. But
Yes.
at the heart of what you're doing is self-care, trauma informed, and reaching people who otherwise might not be reached. Am I hearing you right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, as a self care activist, I focus a lot of my attention on working with social justice organizations, with volunteers, with activists, on building compassion based resilience tools,
Mhm.
but also providing them with many other types of tools that they could tap into. I teach these organizations and individuals how to create coping plans and self care plans, but more importantly, how to make sure that they're sustainable by helping them create communities of care that are formalized. And a really big component of that is mutual aid, which
Yep.
leads us into kind of
Yes. So let's go there for a moment. So the pandemic of love, and
yeah.
so we're in this crazy COVID pandemic. And so where in the hell did that
Right.
idea come from? And what were some of your steps to kind
Yeah.
of doing that and cultivating that? And when did you know, holy shit, there is something here
Yeah.
that I just is going to take over?
I'm still like in the holy shit mode, to be
Okay.
honest with you. But yeah, so
And I know
it's
you're a CNN hero now. Congratulations. So lots going on in your world.
yeah, there's so much, a lot of really exciting things that are happening for sure that can help amplify a lot of the work that we're doing. But I think it, there are two types of people in the world. There's the what ifs and the why nots. This is kind of like what I've come to, right, in my 40 something years of like being on this planet. And I think people who are like the what ifs are people who they just what if everything to death. It's like paralysis, by analysis. Just, what if this happens and what if that goes wrong and what if we do it this way and what if we do it that way? And it's like this huge plan, right? It's and at some point it's failure to launch.
Yeah.
And the why nots are people who are like, well, like, why not me? Like, why not just try it? Like, it can't be that hard. Like, I'll figure it out as I go. You're a why not. You're very much a why not. It's like, why not? I'll just try. What's the worst that can happen? So, but because you can see like what the best is that can happen, right? So you're like, we'll figure it out as we go. And, so that's been my default mode for like the last 4 years. And the other thing that I've worked really hard at since the 2016 election, quite frankly, is rather than complaining about the state of the world and the way that things are, when I hear myself starting to complain, also when I hear other people starting to complain, I pose the question, what are you going to do about it? So what are you going to do about it? I hear you. I hear that you're concerned about this, about the environmental situation or about immigration or about,
Yeah.
what are you going to do about it? And usually people are like taken aback by that because all they really wanted to do was vent, right? They were like, what? I actually have to do something about it?
Yeah.
And so in that default mode, when the bubblings up of anxiety started to reach my social media feeds, and I was getting text messages from people in our South Florida community, which at this point was like, I don't know, like 15,000 people that are part of this group. Remember, I've been teaching on Sunday mornings for 4+ years. And people are like, I'm really scared. I don't know what I'm going to do. We have to shelter in home. I don't have enough groceries. I'm not getting another paycheck. And I really started to sense that fear, and I felt a lot of despair, and I felt great sadness. And I remember kind of having this moment where I do this thing where I think it was because when I was a single like mom and you have like little kid running around the house, you just like the bathroom is the only place you can run and hide. So I still like, that's my thinking place. Like I go to the bathroom floor and I just sit there and I think, and I was thinking about like, I feel so sad. Like I really feel horrible for these people that I deeply, deeply care about that are in our community. And now I know that it's beyond our community, right? It's like, if it's happening here, like multiply it by a lot.
Yeah.
And I immediately like thought to myself, after kind of allowing myself to really grieve, feel that ambiguous loss, if you will, I thought, what am I going to do about it?
Yeah.
I thought, okay, I can use the same system that we've been using for back to school drives and for holiday drives that we do with communities in need in our area. And I'm just going to do it for this pandemic, for this short period of time that we're going to be in, you know? And so I just, not a technologically savvy person. I went to Google Sheets or Google Forms, and I created 2 Google Forms. One was called Give Help and one was called Get Help. And when I tell you they were simple, they were so simple. They didn't even ask for like your zip code, because I just assumed everybody was from the Broward County area that was going to fill it out. And I posted a 40-second video and posted the 2 links up on Facebook and on Instagram. And this was like on a Sunday night. I went to bed. And the next morning I woke up and I remember logging in and thinking, oh, like, you know, let's see what came in, a couple people, whatever. And I was just floored. There were hundreds of people who filled out the Give Help form and hundreds who filled out the Get Help form. And I didn't know many of these individuals, nor were the area codes for their phone numbers, like even just like, I had no idea where these people were coming from. Wow. And I then looked at my phone and I saw a text message from a friend that said, oh my God, like Kristen Bell reposted your thing. And I was like, how did she get like this video? Like what just happened in 12 hours? And it, you know, it's incredible. It's just grown to these epic proportions. One act of kindness, one moment, one thought, one pebble thrown in the water that created these ripples, that created these waves, right? And
thousands of people who have a little extra resources are supporting people who need a little extra resources to get money for groceries, to pay for electric bills, to pay for doctor's bills, all personal.
Yeah, for anything. I mean, honestly, anything. And we've pivoted in so many ways. Like in Navajo Nation, we help pay for, we partnered with Water Warriors United. So we help that organization fund barrels of clean drinking water delivered to people in the remote areas of the reservation who have no access to clean or fresh drinking water. In Salinas, California, with United Farm Workers, we stage every Wednesday an essentials, you know, it's not a food bank, but it's an essentials bank. So like diapers, formula, you know, cleaning supplies, soap, things like that, that you can't get at a food bank, right? And so we stage that with UFW. We've worked with the American Red Cross after Hurricane Laura and after a lot of the storms that happened this year, and with the wildfires out in California and in Oregon. So, you know, we've pivoted to kind of help and use this model. So the model is really simple. We are not a nonprofit. We're a nonprofit disruptor. And what that means is that we don't have a pandemic of a bank account. We never will. We're a grassroots, volunteer-led organization. And that means that a donor pays or interacts or transacts directly with the person in need. And in order for that to happen, they must connect on a human level. They need to have a conversation. So in this time of disconnection, we are forming human connections between 2 perfect strangers who may never have interacted otherwise. And we're giving them this opportunity to view the world with a different lens.
Wow. And to see that I'm in one situation, they're in another situation. and I have something that they might need, but they have something that I might need too,
Yeah,
in terms of helping me get a sense of purpose, a sense of
that's
community,
right.
belonging, and together we can come together. Is that
Yes, it's exactly right. The premise of this is that, well, there's two things. The first is that every single person in this world, regardless of their socioeconomic status or, you know, educational level or what have you, has something that they need. And
yeah,
every person in this world has something that they can offer.
right,
And so if we could just connect all of these individuals, right, in on a communal level and then on a larger level, it would create the second premise, which is equity.
mhm,
And that mantra, what we say as a group, all of our volunteers, is that enough is a feast. Enough is a feast.
beautiful. And just to give people a scope of how much this has happened, how many people have connected in that way?
So we've matched over 750,000 individuals since March 14th. We have directly transacted over $42.5 million. And we have over 1,000 volunteers in 220 chapters all around the globe, not just here in the US.
And it
Um,
all comes from you in your bathroom.
yes, my bathroom floor.
Playing in this bathroom and wondering what can I do, and then
What are
post.
you going to do about it?
What are you going to do about it?
Right. And it goes back to, what am I going to do? I'm going to show up. And then it's, how am I going to show up?
Yes. And whether it impacts 10 people or 10 million people, I'm going to show up, right? I'm going to put it
Right.
out there. I'm going to do my piece. I'm going to trust that the world will do what the world will do with it, but I'm going to show up and do my piece.
Right. And look at, like, there's the theme there, right? It's like, I showed up to the beach on
Yeah.
a windy day. I didn't think anybody, but I showed up for myself too, right? So you show up and you're like, I'm just going to keep showing up. Let's see what happens. And the same thing happened, you know, with a lot of my work in communities affected by gun violence. Just keep showing up. Just keep showing up. And now with this, with Pandemic of Love, it's the same theme. And
Yep.
it's not overthinking it. It's recognizing that on the fly, in real time, that we can modify and pivot and you know, make dynamic decisions, because the world we're living in is very dynamic.
Yeah. And so we're just about out of time, I know, but is that any last thoughts or words? I feel like that's actually a beautiful way to end as well, that we don't have to know everything, as
Yeah.
something we can kind of trust those instincts. What would you like to leave us with here, if anything?
You know, I mean, one of the phrases that I said on the Wisdom 2.0 stage in March, which is incidentally the title of my book that's coming out in September 2021, is that people need to sit down to rise up. And what that means is that, you know, a lot of us, especially in this space of really kind of being self-reflective, are really busy doing the inner work. And we're committed to sort of being very goal oriented and like reaching some sort of goal or making a decision when we get to a certain place, right? And I think that that's actually the wrong way of thinking about it. I think that, you know, we need to kind of like be inspired by Leonard Cohen's, you know, famous words of like, the cracks are where the lights come in, and recognize that even if we show up and we're fractured and we're bruised and we're you know, we've got cracks, it's okay, you know, because everybody else showing up is going to be exactly the same way. And so, you know, don't like overthink it. Be a what if. I mean, a why not a what if type of person, you know, and just jump in and show up.
Beautiful. It reminds me of, there's that Joseph Campbell quote where he says, well, he's talking about following your bliss, but you follow your bliss and doors will open where you never thought there to be doors, and when there wouldn't be doors for somebody else. But it doesn't fucking show us if we don't show up. We
That's
can't
right.
close doors, right?
That's right. Exactly. Exactly. Just keep showing up and just trust that eventually the tiles will appear, and they will. They will. And it may take a little while, but that's okay, because you're going to learn a lot about yourself in the process.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.